The Hero with a Thousand Faces is one of the books that actually changed the shape of how people tell stories, not just influenced them, but changed the underlying structure. And strangely enough, most of the people it influenced most deeply never actually read it. They just encountered it through something it touched, whether it was a film, a song, or a story that truly resonated. The author, Joseph Campbell, was a rare academic figure who completely escaped the university. He spent nearly 4 decades teaching at Sarah Lawrence College, but his real formation happened earlier. He came from a strict Roman Catholic background. He spent 5 years in almost monastic, self directed reading during the Depression after he walked away from a fellowship and just read Sanskrit, mythology, Jung, folklore, and by the time he published this book in 1949, he had read more widely across world mythology than almost anyone alive. And what he kept finding, no matter which culture, which century, which corner of the globe, was a pattern. One story told 10,000 times in 10,000 costumes, but underneath, always the same structure. He called it the monomyth, and that single idea rewired how a generation thought about narrative, psychology, and what stories are actually for. The idea of the monomyth is simple once you see it. A person lives in a familiar world. Something calls them toward the unknown, a loss, a longing, a problem that won't let go. They resist. Then they cross a threshold into unfamiliar territory. There are trials, a crisis at the deepest point, the darkest moment, the innermost place. Something has to be surrendered there. And out of that, something new. Then comes a return, back to where they started, but carrying something the world needs. We've all heard this story. It's in the Odyssey and the life of the Buddha and the Navajo emergence myths and the gospel narratives and Star Wars, which Lucas was reading Campbell to write. It's in fairy tales you heard as a child that felt very much authentic. Campbell's argument is that this convergence is not coincidence or cultural borrowing. It's something structural about the human mind. The story we keep telling is the story of inner transformation and always has been. Campbell is deeply indebted to Jung. The monomyth isn't just a literary pattern, it's a map of the unconscious. The dragon the hero fights is a projection of the shadow. The goddess encountered along the way is the anima. The wise figure who appears at the threshold is the self. The outward journey is an inward one. This is the whole thesis, really. Mythology isn't primitive science trying to explain thunder or seasons. It's a technology of the psyche. It's how human beings have always communicated the transformation to each other in a language that bypasses logic and goes straight to the gut. And if you've ever been in a genuine threshold moment in your own life, you recognize this framework. The disorientation of having left something behind with no guarantee of what's ahead. The feeling that something is being asked of you that you're not sure you have. Campbell is saying that experience has a shape. It always did. And the shape has been mapped and remapped and sung and written for as long as human beings have been human. The part of the book that earns the most attention is what Campbell calls the road of trials. Not the call to adventure, which gets all the romantic attention, not the return, which gets all the glory, but the middle, the part where things are stripped away, where the person you thought you were starts to become inadequate to what the journey actually requires. That's where the real work is, and Campbell doesn't rush through it. He lingers there. He draws from dozens of traditions to show how the ordeal has been understood and what it's actually doing to the person going through it. The hero doesn't just complete a mission, they become someone different. And that transformation, not the external victory, is the actual point of every story that lasts. That's what Campbell keeps returning to. The prize brought back from the quest is not a sword or a kingdom, it's understanding, something that can be offered to the world because it was earned in the dark. The critique of Campbell is also worth mentioning, by the way. The monomyth, as he frames it, is built almost entirely around a male protagonist. The hero goes out, conquers, returns. Women in his schema tend to appear as thresholds, temptresses, or rewards, not as travelers on their own journey. Now, Maureen Murdoch, who studied with Campbell directly, pushed back on this and wrote the heroine's journey as a corrective and argued that women's inner journeys follow a different structure entirely, less about going out and winning something, more about descent, dismemberment, and the recovery of something lost. It's an absolutely necessary companion to this book. Another problem is that when you put every myth from every culture into the same template, you risk losing what's specific about each one. A Yoruba myth and a Greek myth and a Vedic myth are not the same story. Their differences have meaning. Campbell's synthesis is definitely illuminating, but it can make everything feel like a variation on one theme, which is its own kind of reductionism. And at some point, it gets so universal it stops being useful for the particular. And yet, even with those critiques fully in hand, the book does something very few books manage. It makes you feel that your life has a shape, not a random accumulation of events, not a series of accidents, but a story with a structure, a call, a threshold, an ordeal with a purpose, a return, and that the difficult things you already survived were not just things that happened to you, they were initiations, whether you claimed what they were offering or not. The Hero with a Thousand Faces is dense in places. Campbell is not always an easy read, and the middle sections in particular require patience. But what you're absorbing isn't just information, it's a lens, it's a perspective. And once you have it, you use it constantly on the stories around you, on the stories you've lived, on the one you're in right now. Campbell famously said, "Follow your bliss." And people often hear that as a permission to do whatever feels good. But he meant something much harder. He meant follow the thing that is most deeply, persistently, even uncomfortably yours. The thing that won't let you go even when the road toward it looks nothing like what you planned. That's the invitation. And this book is how he extended it across 10,000 years of stories that were always saying the same thing.